Hey guys, it's Ashley Francis with Blue Sage Counseling and Wellness, and today we're doing another installment on attachment styles. And today's video is going to be about the Anxious-Avoidant Attachment Style. And you can look down in the comments for links to the other videos for the other attachment styles. So what we're going to be talking about are characteristics of children who have an Anxious-Avoidant Attachment Style. We'll also be talking about parents of children with an anxious-avoidant attachment style. And then we'll be talking about how this presents in adulthood. We'll talk about ways to work on having a secure attachment style. And then also some tips for parents who have children that have an anxious-avoidant attachment style. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. Anyway, let's hop into it. So the characteristics of the child with this type of attachment style: they will avoid or ignore the caregiver. They show little emotion when the caregiver departs or returns. They are outwardly unemotional, but they are inwardly anxious. And this is evidenced by physically on the outside, the child may seem like they don't care, they're unbothered. But studies have shown that when they're hooked up to a heart monitor, it actually shows that their pulse is like through the roof. The child is inwardly in turmoil, but on the outside can be very stoic. They also feel desperate for the caretaker to return. They may have thoughts that he or she is dying or never coming back. This usually tends to be more on the extreme end. It's not uncommon for kids to have that fear and have those thoughts and not have this attachment style, but this is something that we see pervasively. It happens over time, over and over again. Good distinction there. But they're also afraid to tell the caretaker out of fear of judgment or rejection that they're hurting or they're feeling anxious. It's sort of like, I don't want to look weak, but I also want love too. So the anxious avoidant attachment style is characterized by a dichotomy. It's a contradiction. I don't want to be this weak person, but at the same time, I need this love and I don't know how to act. I don't know how to get it. They have everything they need, but they don't feel deeply connected to anyone. They learn to act like they don't care when they're being punished or they're laughed at or criticized when expressing their emotions. So there again, that's sort of this priming or this training to stuff the emotions because they're not going to get answered anyway. The child quickly learns that it doesn't matter. It's not going to make a freaking difference. So I might as well stuff these down because at the very worst, I could risk punishment or criticism. So I better not do it. Deep down, they just want to be held. They're just kids. They want love. They want affection and attention and approval from their caretakers. This is a universal need. We all need it. They just want to be told that everything is okay. They're often afraid to explore very much regardless of who is there. So if they're in a room with other peers and other toys, other adults, they have a tendency to kind of keep to themselves. So now let's talk about the parents of children with anxious avoidant attachment style. They're emotionally distant 1 minute, and then they're loving the next. They're again part of that contradiction. Their patterns can be very unpredictable, yet predictable. So the child doesn't know when the parent is going to be showing affection or present and when they're not going to be, but the pattern actually is quite predictable in the fact that they're going to engage in that pattern back and forth at some point. They also mimic the pattern that was displayed to them by their caregivers when they were children. This is an intergenerational type of thing. It will continue. It does continue until finally someone says, you know what? Freaking tired of this. This is terrible. I'm tired of feeling awful. I need to do something. It's not uncommon for these things to just simply continue for a long time. It's also similar to the anxious attachment style, but the main difference here is that the parent actively discourages and or punishes the child for expressing emotion. We don't see that as much in the anxious attachment style. It can happen, but really this is a hallmark of the anxious avoidant. The caregiver provides for the child's needs, but is not emotionally present. So a good example of this is the parent that works 60 hours a week. So they're able to provide for their child. They're well clothed. They have all of their needs met. They don't want for anything except for closeness with their parents. And that parent they're only able to provide things monetarily because they're working so hard. They actively discourage the expression of emotion either through punishment or simply ignoring the request as well. So it's not always something that is conveyed through punishment, but also if things are just simply ignored. The child is asking for things over and over again and they just simply don't get them. So now let's talk about how this shows up in adulthood. Even in teen years as well, we can start to see this. There's a push and pull effect where you're pulling others close and then you push them away, repeat. Sort of this, I hate you, I love you. I hate you, I love you. This is the main characteristic of this type of attachment style. They can tend to be on an emotional roller coaster. One minute they're happy and the next they're angry. Emotions tend to be very volatile, especially when they're in a relationship with someone. You're going to see these emotions come out the most with their partner. If the anxious avoidant partner interprets their partner to be distant, they will become clingy and desperate. If the partner is perceived to be clingy, then the anxious avoidant will run away. Roles reverse repeatedly, and this is how it becomes an addiction. So this also is a big hallmark of this type of attachment. So the anxious avoidant partner, if they just have the slightest sense that their partner is pulling away, it can make them very anxious and go into hypersensitive mode, and they may send tons of texts, they may show up at your house, those kinds of things. But then it flips the opposite way, that if they start to feel like the partner is being overly attentive, then they're going to retreat. And the kicker is, even if that partner is being adequately attentive in a healthy way, the anxious avoidant partner is going to see that as too clingy and they're going to pull away. And it's this cat and mouse game. There's emotional stuffing, yet they're still desperate to be loved. They're overly attuned to their partner's needs and moods. If they have the slightest sense that the partner's pulling away, it feels like it is the end of the world. It is really, really hard to console this type of person when they are feeling as though their partner is pulling away or they might be losing them. But as soon as they come back, they don't want them. Okay, so now how to develop a more secure attachment style. This is when you recognize that your emotions may not be giving you accurate feedback about what's going on in your relationship. It may not be about your partner, but rather that it serves as a trigger. So what this means is that the emotions that you're feeling in the midst of these panics, this push and pull type of thing, giving credence to the fact that this might not actually be real. This could be irrational. Just bringing awareness to that is step one. That this could be tied to something else here. And typically it's tied to relationships from childhood. Emotions are not giving you accurate feedback. They can't be reliable. Taking a step back and trying to figure out, where is this all coming from? This is a big one too, is you take a long time out before taking action. Take time to get clear on your emotions and what's happening, and then you cultivate a mature response. So there again, the anxious avoidant tends to experience a lot of impulsivity, a lot of big emotions. They want to do something, they want to fix it right away, and sometimes that can make it worse. So this is the biggest one that I always recommend to people with this attachment style, is take a deep breath, take a step back, remove yourself from the situation, don't text, don't call. Try to let the emotions come down and then go back and address the situation once emotions have calmed down. They don't have to be back to baseline. That may not happen, but they at least need to be lowered. So shoot for lowering the emotional intensity. Here's a big one too. Don't overshare until you know the source is trusted. So the anxious avoidant, it does tend to hop into relationships very quickly. It gets hot and heavy. There's a lot of passion. And this will create what I call artificial intimacy. And this person will tend to overshare with another person when it's really not at a healthy place. It's not time in the relationship to be sharing as much as you are. This can also add to the intensity and the difficulty in being able to break this type of cycle. Practice standing your ground and staying through the end. When you start to get close to someone and feel the itch to run away, don't. Stick around and stick it out and see what you can learn. And if it needs to end, then end it completely. So this sounds a little dicey, but the whole idea is that you're stuck in a pattern because you keep doing the same things over and over again. The first thing that we need to do to break a pattern is just do one small thing differently. So if you typically retreat, don't retreat. Stick around, ask questions, see if you can learn more. But if it does in fact need to end, then you need to walk away and end it completely. Very, very, very hard to do. Much easier said than done, especially with this type of attachment style. But seeking out resources and support to help you do that can be really, really helpful. The last part is how to parent a child with anxious-avoidant attachment style. So sort of like what we talked about earlier, it's about identifying your own attachment style. If you're starting to sense that your child is exhibiting this type of style, then it's time for you to dig in and figure out what is your attachment style. And spoiler alert, it's likely anxious avoidant. Like we were saying earlier, these things tend to be very intergenerational. So there's a very high likelihood that you also have this type of attachment style. What we want to do is we want to learn how to express emotion. If you were punished or emotions were discouraged to be expressed in your home, then you didn't learn to express emotion. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. It just simply means that you didn't get that skill set. And guess what? Your caretaker probably didn't get that skill set either. But the good news is that this stuff can get turned around. You can learn these types of skills. What I recommend is to start small and start simple. Just start pushing yourself to talk a little bit more about yourself, your thoughts, your feelings when you're talking to friends and family. That's the easiest source. Maybe say one extra thing that you normally wouldn't, just to kind of put yourself out there and break the mold. Another idea is to use a therapy game. There's all kinds of like therapy card games out there. The one that I like, it's kind of dated, but it's still a good one, is the Ungame. All it is just a deck of cards that has prompts to guide a conversation. If you can't come up with anything, if you're having a hard time cultivating a conversation, then let these therapy games take some of the difficulty out of that. Also, attending therapy. So some of these things can be helpful to get you started, but once you get started, you might notice that it's a little harder than you thought it was, and that's okay. The purpose of therapy in this regard is to look at your childhood relationships and see exactly how and where this dynamic was formed, where it all comes from. And what that does is it helps to provide some insight into what needs to be done now for you specifically to be able to break this pattern. Because what's going to work for me is not going to necessarily work for you or the person next to you. So this really puts it into a personally tailored way of going about learning how to express emotion, but also breaking these patterns. And then finally, also modeling emotional expression. So once you start to dig in and learn how to do this and get some practice, you want to model that around your children. That's what's going to teach them proper emotional development. But you've got to go through it first. It helps your children learn to speak up for themselves. They can talk about how they're feeling, but you also want to challenge them to dig deeper, especially for teenagers who have a tendency to really shut down and shut you out. If you continue to model having vulnerable conversations and talking about your day and how you're feeling, and maybe even providing some stories from your childhood or when you were a teenager to demonstrate to them that they're not alone, it then prompts them to feel more comfortable to talk about those things with you too. That will do it for today's discussion on anxious-avoidant attachment. Disclaimer here, please keep in mind that this is just a roadmap. It doesn't mean that you are fundamentally flawed or there's things that you're permanently damaged. There's hope, absolutely. These things can change. And hopefully by following some of these tips, you can start to turn things around and learn some things about yourself. There's absolutely hope that these things can get better. If you like what you heard, please let me know. If you don't like what you heard, let me know in the comments section below. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to our channel to see more videos like this. Again, the other videos for the other attachment styles are in the comments section below. Take care.